Welcome to Common Sense. Here, we dive deep into history, culture, and society, bringing you detailed analyses of key events, influential figures, and complex systems that shape our world today. Whether it's exploring the life and work of Dr. Ambedkar or understanding the deeper mechanisms of social structures, our mission is to enlighten, educate, and inspire. Subscribe and join us on this journey of discovery and transformation.
Summary of Federation versus Freedom in 20 bullet points. This summary draws exclusively from the provided excerpt of volume_01.pdf, specifically from Dr. Ambedkar's Federation versus Freedom address. Context and Introduction. 1. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar delivered the address Federation versus Freedom in 1939 as a Kale Memorial Lecture at the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics in Poona, now Pune. The address was given during a pivotal moment in India's political history, as the question of accepting the federal structure proposed by the Government of India Act of 1935 was a major point of debate. 2. The address aimed to critically examine the federal scheme proposed by the Government of India Act of 1935, recognizing the complexity and vastness of the scheme. Dr. Ambedkar set out to analyze it within the limited time frame of his lecture. He focused on evaluating the scheme against established principles of federalism and presenting his findings to the audience. Key arguments against the federal scheme. 3. Unequal and unbalanced representation. The federal scheme proposed a bicameral legislature with an upper house council of state and a lower house legislative assembly. Dr. Ambedkar criticized the allocation of seats in both houses, arguing that British India was underrepresented while the Indian states were overrepresented. This disproportionate representation, he argued, granted the Indian states undue influence in the federal legislature. 4. Undemocratic representation of Indian states. Dr. Ambedkar strongly criticized the nominated nature of representatives from the Indian states. While representatives from British India were to be elected, those from the Indian states were to be appointed by the rulers. This difference, he argued, undermined the democratic principles of the Federation. 5. Limited responsibility of the executive. While the federal scheme proposed a responsible government, Dr. Ambedkar argued that this responsibility was severely limited. The Governor-General retained significant powers, particularly in areas like defense, external affairs, and tribal areas, where he was not accountable to the legislature. Inequality between provinces and states. A cornerstone of Dr. Ambedkar's critique was the unequal relationship between the British Indian provinces and the Indian states under the federal scheme. He highlighted how the states held a more advantageous position, enjoying greater autonomy and exemptions, especially in taxation. Hindrance to democratization of states. Dr. Ambedkar argued that the federal scheme, instead of encouraging the democratization of the autocratic Indian states, would actually hinder it. The structure, he argued, provided the states with significant influence over British India without a reciprocal impact on their own internal governance. Threat to freedom and progress. He expressed concern that the federal scheme, by entrenching the authority of the princes and limiting the powers of the legislature, posed a threat to individual freedom and economic progress. He argued that the scheme would hinder the pursuit of social justice and economic reforms. Obstruction to dominion status. A critical flaw Dr. Ambedkar identified was the federal scheme's impedance to India achieving dominion status. He argued that the scheme's structure and the influence it afforded the princes would make it significantly more difficult for India to attain full autonomy. Lack of true unity. Contrary to the claims of its proponents, Dr. Ambedkar argued that the federal scheme would not foster genuine unity in India. The unequal relationship between the provinces and states, he argued, would lead to friction and resentment, undermining the goal of a unified nation, alternatives and recommendations. Focus on British India Federation. Dr. Ambedkar suggested that a more viable approach would be to focus on establishing a federation of British Indian provinces first. This, he argued, would allow for the development of a more equitable and democratic system within British India. Resolution of the states issue. He emphasized the need to address the issue of the Indian states separately, arguing that their integration into a federation should not come at the cost of democracy or the rights of their subjects. He advocated for a solution that prioritized the welfare of the people living within the states. Full responsible government. Dr. Ambedkar stressed the paramount importance of establishing a system with full responsible government at the center. He believed that anything short of complete responsibility would render provincial autonomy meaningless and perpetuate the existing power imbalance. Dr. Ambedkar's stance and conclusion. Rejection of the proposed scheme. Dr. Ambedkar emphatically stated his opposition to the federal scheme as presented in the Government of India Act of 1935. He believed that the scheme was fundamentally flawed and incapable of leading India towards its goals of unity, freedom, and progress. Prioritization of fundamental issues over details. He cautioned against getting caught up in minor details and amendments, emphasizing the need to address the fundamental issues of responsibility, democracy, and the unequal relationship between the provinces and states. Importance of public awareness. Dr. Ambedkar urged the public to carefully consider the implications of the federal scheme, emphasizing the potential dangers it posed to their freedom and well-being. He encouraged them to critically evaluate the scheme and reach their own conclusions. Concluding observations. The address highlights Dr. Ambedkar's profound understanding of federalism and his sharp critique of a scheme that he believed would ultimately be detrimental to India's interests. Dr. Ambedkar's concerns about the unequal relationship between British India and the Indian states, the lack of full responsible government, and the potential for the scheme to hinder social and economic progress remain relevant even today. The address serves as a reminder of the complexities involved in crafting a political system that balances diverse interests while ensuring justice, equality, and progress for all. Federation versus freedom is a powerful testament to Dr. Ambedkar's commitment to democratic principles, social justice, and the pursuit of a truly free and equitable India.
Thanks for watching. If you found this content insightful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button for more in-depth explorations into history, society, and culture. Stay tuned for our next episode, and until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better tomorrow. See you next time.